without commenting on how quickly you have to state your value proposition, panelists, when someone says I want $1 million, what do you want to hear? Why they want to? What do you want to hear in the why response?
Well, from the personal financial side, I can't tell you how many businesses come to us and they say they want capital and their personal credit is shot. And the first thing that we look at is to make sure your personal finances are in order in terms of your credit. You have to understand that 35% of your FICO score is a record of paying your bills on time. You know, you miss one payment, 50 to 100 points goes immediately off of your FICO score. 30% of your FICO score is your balance to your total line of credit. It amazes me when this line of instant gratification, immediate gratification, how much we use credit cards as opposed to trying to rely upon capital. And the time when we try to procure funding, those credit cards, we may have been late, we may have been racked up a whole lot of credit card debt, ends up coming up biting us because 30% of our FICO score is how much credit card debt we're using.
Everybody in the room know what a FICO score is? Do you all know your score? Okay. Any comment, Corey?
Well, I can tell you, just to follow up, as far as knowing your FICO score is actually quite important. Simply because of the fact that when you do sit down in front of individuals or a group that you're asking for funding, more likely than not going to be based upon projections in a business that you may or may not have been successful with previously, and now you're taking and you're growing to a different level. And they're going to look at that score and they're going to say, okay, well, how does that define the individual that we're dealing with? And unfortunately, in this market today, with the credit crunch being what it is, banks and funding institutions are looking more and more to say no than they ever did before. So with that in mind, knowing what your FICO score is and having, quote unquote, an acceptable score, and what is acceptable is also another question. It's whether, you know, if your score is 650 and as a number and you never had a blemish, or your score is 750 and you did have a blemish, what is the difference between those? It's knowing what you have, but carrying on from there. And I asked the question of, when you look at a number which is $1 million, the question becomes why is it $1 million versus $500,000 versus $1.5 million? And you should not just arbitrarily pick what that number should be. I think that sounds like a right number. You actually, as part of your business plan, have to work back to the number, and whether it's $1 million or $1.3 million or 700, do not look to try to, quote unquote, build into the number, at least before you get there, a cushion for the rainy day, or the cushion for, I want to have a certain type of employee or a certain type of environment. You really have to see what your business plan is going to throw off, and then apply what you're looking to borrow towards it to see how it's going to work out in total.
Mark, any comments?
Not on this. I mean, the one thing I can say is in the business that I do, I don't work that often with where the personal credit score is that important. I mean, sometimes I do, but and everything that these gentlemen said is absolutely critical and correct. But in terms of the use of proceeds, I rarely see a use of proceeds that I agree with. And it's one of the fundamental things in a business plan when you're talking to investors. Okay, what are you going to do with my money? And you know, and that's because often the experience, even with people who are experienced, I find this same problem with people who aren't experienced. Like I don't work very often with startups, but I used to. And in the startup game, most of the people that you're dealing with are brilliant at what they're doing, but don't know much about building a business or finance, and they usually, because they're a startup, they can't pay for that kind of help. So they typically got a friend or a family member or someone's advising them, etc. And until they get that first, you know, at least that angel round where they have some money where they could actually buy good advice, they usually aren't able to even put a business plan together that has a use of proceeds that makes sense.
We should talk about angels and other easy money, which we will in a few moments. But I'll also say that your elevator pitch, that's a real concept, folks. You've got 3 sentences before the elevator door opens to say what you're doing, why you deserve the money, and you should say it with real passion, real conviction, and where that money is going to go. So when we say use of proceeds, what are you spending it on, and why does it make sense to spend that money really quickly? A couple of resources just to share, as long as we're on the subject, since so many of you have not done business plans. So Palo Alto software makes you all look great. It's free online. I mean, well, it costs money. Order it online by Palo Alto software. I think it's called Business Plan Starter Kit or something. And what's nice about that is you can do 100 businesses. It'll ask you some questions, create a very pretty plan, and you can indicate that you want to download it later or compare it to QuickBooks or some of the other bookkeeping plans, and that's a nice one to take a look at. Another resource, of course, is things like mycreditscore.com, the 3 company credits, if you don't know your FICO score to get it. So a question on what do you mean by an angel? I mean, an angel is an uncle, an angel's a cousin, an angel might be a local business person, and a classic easy money might be your credit cards, which we're all warned by everyone, including our new president, to try and avoid. But as a small business, it may be inevitable. Have you not seen many businesses that have spent money on credit cards? Panelists.
Just to talk about borrowing money from family, if I can just touch on that for just a brief second. Just understand that at the end of the day, you want to start your company, you want to be successful, but family is very important, and that's the most important thing. So sometimes borrowing money from family can put that additional strain on family relationships that don't necessarily always want to go there. So, if you want to borrow money from your brother, I can't tell you how many times I've seen families and brothers and friends, and they've just been disintegrated, their relationships have been disintegrated because they wanted to borrow money and say, I got this great business idea that we want to start. And when using credit cards, to address that question, walking through the airport, you can't walk 2 feet without being mugged by these airlines people trying to come and get you to apply for these credit cards, And every time you fill out a credit card application, one, you have to make sure it's very purposeful. Just because you get a free t-shirt doesn't mean you want to necessarily open up a credit card. So you want to go to bankrate.com. You want to figure out what's the best credit card. Make sure it has no fees. Make sure you want to see the total line of credit matches with your needs, whether it be a business need or a personal need. You want to make sure it has a good APR rate. You want to make sure you, again, back to your FICO score, make sure it's in a good position where you can demand a lower APR initially. So all these things are more in terms of your credit card. You want to, again, just make sure it's very purposeful in how you select one.
And tell these folks how you've paid it down. I borrowed this because it's in my plan. I'm able to make these monthly payments because I planned for them. I know what I'm going to do, and my intent is to pay it down and get a larger line. That's an okay story to tell. Corey, any other kinds of angels?
I was about to say the other angel, so to speak, in my world, which certainly should be a part of all your worlds in a new business, is the SBA, which is the Small Business Administration. And it's specifically designed and in place for those who necessarily never had 10 cents worth of income in the business that they're about to get into. Yet they have a business plan, and it's viable, and it's verifiable. And in doing so, you can absolutely obtain money for your new business. It's involved, it takes time, but it is probably, as far as government sourcing is concerned, the #1 way for a small business to obtain funding to get off the ground.
SBA has resources here in Brooklyn, starting with St. Nick's Business Development Center, your host today. They'll be published on the website that's dedicated to today, the brooklynbusinesssummit.com, and we want to hear from you. So answer those online questionnaires that are going to be on that summit, and let us know about your business. You had a question?
Could you say a little bit more about the use of you made the sort of cryptic comment, you very rarely see a use of proceeds that you agree with. Can you speak in general terms about what that has looked like and what you would prefer to see?